The invitation never came. Not a call, not a text, not even one of those mass evites people pretend are mistakes when you confront them. My younger brother got married last weekend. I only found out because Aunt Miriam posted a blurry photo of the reception on her Facebook story, a shimmering tent strung with fairy lights and white roses, and I recognized the back of my mother's dress. The green one. The one she always says she saves for important events. I sat on the floor of my apartment, cross-legged like a child, holding my phone in both hands, staring at the screen until it dimmed from inactivity. Then I clicked it back on. Watched the clip again. And again. I knew the venue. I recognized the pond behind the tent. It was only 20 minutes from me. 20 minutes. And no one thought I should be there. The silence that followed wasn't surprising. My family's rejections never came in shouts or slammed doors. They came in the form of exclusions, muted group chats, inside jokes passed around at holidays while I cleared the dishes. When we were kids, my brother Ben would cry until I gave him the last slice of pie. Now, apparently, he just quietly scrubbed me from his wedding guest list. It was strange. You grow up in a house full of people and somehow still end up as the one who doesn't exist. I scrolled through the rest of Aunt Miriam's story. A photo of the cake, a video of the dance floor, then a pan over the gift table. My handwriting caught my eye before my brain registered it. A card, nestled against a gold-wrapped box, my cursive scrawl, for Ben and Elise. I blinked. The gift I'd mailed 2 months ago. A custom vintage record player. Ivory shell, real mahogany arm. I remembered the note I included. For your first apartment, may it always feel like home. I should have known then. I should have realized that the silence around wedding planning wasn't just busyness, that the lack of a +1 question or a dress code reminder wasn't forgetfulness. They just didn't want me there. The box I had sent sat there like a joke, a metaphor for my place in the family, not at the table, just quietly useful in the background. All week, I found myself mentally rewinding. To last Thanksgiving, when Mom asked me to pick up Ben from the airport and didn't wait for me to answer before assigning me 3 grocery store stops. To the year before, when I spent my bonus on a new dishwasher for the family home because the old one leaked, and they forgot to invite me for Christmas dinner. To the time I was sick and called my mother 3 times in one day. No answer. But she reposted Ben's engagement photos with the caption, "My pride and joy." I remember sitting in bed, sweaty with fever, and clicking like. I didn't tell anyone what I found out. I went to work like usual, took my coffee black, listened to my coworkers complain about their in-laws with soft, non-committal nods. But I stopped replying to the family group chat, the one they titled The Originals, as if I wasn't one of them. And that Saturday, when I received the thank you card in the mail from Ben and Elise, I didn't open it. I just looked at the envelope for a while. Then I picked it up, and I walked over to the drawer in my hallway, the one that held receipts, warranties, serial numbers. I found the one for the record player, called the company, and I initiated a return. The return label printed quietly on my old inkjet, the kind of silence that hums, soft and metallic, like something breathing in the walls. I folded the thank you note without reading it and slid it inside the return box with the record player. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe I should have written, "I saw the photos," or "You forgot me," but I didn't. I just sealed the box with slow, steady tape. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was just about weight. I didn't want to carry the heaviness of that gift anymore. Didn't want them to have it either. The next morning, I stood in line at the post office behind an old woman mailing Christmas sweaters and a man who smelled like cigarette smoke and mint gum. I handed the box over, watched it disappear into the back. When I stepped out into the cold, I felt something in my ribs shift. Not quite relief, just less ache. That week, no one noticed I was gone from the family chat. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. The thread kept going. Ben posted a picture of their honeymoon in Kyoto. My mother replied with, "You both look radiant." My father added, "Proud doesn't even cover it." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, typed out, "Do you realize I was never invited?" But then I deleted it. Instead, I opened my notes app and started writing a list. I titled it, Things They Never Noticed. The night I drove Dad to the ER when his blood pressure spiked. The time I stayed late to set up for Ben's graduation party when he was too hungover to help. The money I Venmo'd Mom to cover the vet bill when she said she was too embarrassed to ask Dad. The sweater Elise borrowed 2 years ago and never returned. The fact that I always sat at the corner of the table so everyone else could talk easier. It started small, but the list kept growing, line after line, until it became its own kind of grief. Not a scream, not a sob, just a quiet acknowledgement of everything I gave, and everything they didn't see. A week after mailing the return, I got a text from Ben. Hey, did you return the record player? Elise said it was gone from the apartment. Tracking says refunded. Is everything okay? I stared at it for an hour, read it while washing dishes, while brushing my teeth, while sitting on the floor of my apartment, wrapped in my old college hoodie, knees pulled to my chest. I almost didn't reply. But then something hollow in me whispered, just once, tell the truth. So I typed, You didn't invite me to your wedding. I thought the gift didn't belong there. I'm okay, but I just wanted you to know what you lost. He didn't respond that night. He didn't respond the next day either. But 3 days later, Mom called. I let it ring the first time, let it ring again the next. By the third call, I picked up. Hello? She sounded surprised I answered, or maybe just thrown off by the flatness in my voice. I didn't know you were feeling this way, she said softly. I said nothing. She filled the silence with a sigh. Ben said you returned the gift. That seems unnecessary. It always amazed me how she could condense years of rejection into a single sentence, how she could fold pain into politeness, like pressing linens into a drawer. I wasn't invited, I said. A pause. We thought it'd be easier. Another pause, a breath, and then she added, You know how you get at events like that. There it was. You know how you get. The quiet accusation buried in concern. The implication that my discomfort was disruptive, that my presence might chip the edges of their perfect night. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to be disruptive, I said. I just didn't want to be forgotten. She didn't say anything to that, just a small rustle on the other end of the line. Then, I suppose we owe you an apology. But it didn't sound like one. It sounded like she was borrowing the words from a language she didn't quite speak. Later that night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, looking out over the streetlights and parked cars. The wind rattled softly against the glass. My phone buzzed once. A text. From Benjamin. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd feel this way. It sat on my screen like a pebble thrown into a lake. Barely a ripple. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to explain. Ben's text sat unread for 3 more days. I let it live there, untouched, like something under glass. I wasn't punishing him. I just didn't want to be gaslit into softness again. I knew what that kind of message meant. I didn't realize you'd feel this way. It shifted the weight to me, my feelings, my fault, as if invisibility was a preference I failed to opt out of. But I didn't need an apology dipped in guilt. I needed someone to look at me and finally see the bruise. That weekend, I went through my closet. It wasn't spring, but something in me felt ready to shed. The black dress I bought just in case they called last minute. The heels I wore to Elise's bridal shower. Even the box of family ornaments Mom gave me 6 Christmases ago. All of it went into bags. I didn't donate it. I didn't burn it. I just packed it away and put it in the hallway closet, under the broken vacuum and a beach umbrella I hadn't used in 5 years. I needed it out of sight, because I was finally beginning to believe that being unwanted wasn't a reflection of my worth, just a reflection of their inability to love anything that wasn't convenient. Monday morning, my manager called me into her office. Everything okay? She asked, not unkindly. I nodded. Just a quiet week. She smiled. Well, your reviews came back. Stellar. I wanted to talk about something. I blinked. In the space of 10 minutes, she offered me a travel opportunity, an off-site client project in Montreal, 3 months minimum. New faces, new routine, clean snow on unfamiliar sidewalks. I didn't say yes, not yet, but I didn't say no either. That night, I cooked dinner just for myself. Real food. Garlic and rosemary. Chicken thighs with the skin left on. I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but because the light felt warm in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. I sat down to eat without checking my phone once. No background noise, no Instagram scrolling. Just me, a fork, a full plate. On Wednesday, a small package arrived. No return address. I opened it on the kitchen counter. Inside, a record. Bill Withers, just the two of us. There was a note, Ben's handwriting. I know it's late. I didn't know how much I was leaving behind. You were always the one who remembered birthdays, fixed things, forgave us too easily. I didn't think you needed us. I see now how wrong I was. You were never the quiet one. We were just too loud to listen. No signature, no apology, just the record. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel moved. I just stood there, reading the words again, and thought how strange it was that the most honest message I'd ever received from my brother arrived through the mail. How every attempt at closeness had always come too late. I placed the record on the counter and walked to the corner of the living room where the record player used to sit. The space was empty now. Dustless, clean, like nothing had ever been there. I looked down at the album, the warm brown tones, the title in soft script. Then I tucked it into a bookshelf. Between old poetry anthologies and a pressed flower I kept from a cafe napkin 3 years ago. I didn't throw it out, but I didn't play it either. That night, Montreal started to feel like a yes. Not for escape, but for return. Return to myself, maybe. The one I kept leaving behind in other people's silences. Montreal said yes before I did. A second email arrived with the subject line, "We'd love to have you, hotel and stipend included." I read it on the train to work, fingers curled around the metal pole, the car swaying softly in rhythm. Outside the window, the world moved like it always had. Gray, repetitive, indifferent. But something inside me felt different. Lighter, as if the ache had turned into air. I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to hide, but because I wanted to see how long it would take them to notice I was gone. On my last night in town, I walked the neighborhood one last time. The grocery store where I once cried in aisle 7 because Mom called to say they had Thanksgiving early, without me, because Ben's schedule was tight. The laundromat where I sat through hours of rinse and spin, writing birthday cards for people who never remembered mine. The park where I'd once watched a family of strangers decorate a picnic table for a birthday. Their laughter echoed in my memory like something I never got to have. I'd lived here 5 years, grown up here in ways my family never saw, and now I was folding myself away from it. Not with bitterness, just with the quiet decision that I no longer owed anyone my staying. The apartment was mostly packed. I left a few things behind. The ceramic mug with the chipped rim, the old blanket with the stitched initials. Some ghosts deserved to linger a little. The night before my flight, my phone lit up. A group message. The originals, Mom. "We're doing a small dinner this weekend, thought we'd all catch up." Ben. "Yeah, Elise made a stew she swears is life-changing, lol." Mom. "Can you come by Saturday?" I stared at it. No mention of Montreal. No question about where I'd been these past few weeks. Just the assumption that I was still orbiting them, always within reach, always on call, always available for when they decided to remember I existed. I didn't reply. I archived the chat instead, watched it disappear from my screen like fog on glass. The next morning, I boarded the flight. No one saw me off. No goodbye hugs at the gate. No texts asking, "Are you excited?" Not even a, "Let us know when you land." It was the cleanest kind of departure, the kind where no one even realizes you've left. Montreal met me with cold air and open space. The city hummed in a language I didn't speak, but somehow felt welcome in. My hotel room was small but bright. There were no framed photos, no memories trapped in the walls, just the click of the radiator and the softest kind of quiet. I opened the window that first night and let the cold in. The silence wasn't lonely. It was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an afterthought. There was no one to perform for, no one to shrink beside. I walked the city slowly, coffee in hand, hands in coat pockets. No agenda, no one waiting, no one missing me. But that was the point. One night, I passed a small record shop tucked between a used bookstore and a bakery. It was closing soon, the lights inside warm and golden. Without thinking, I stepped in. Rows of vinyl, dust in the air. A faint song playing, Ain't No Sunshine, Bill Withers again. I stood still for a moment. The man behind the counter nodded at me. I nodded back. I didn't look for that album. Didn't mention the one waiting back in my bookshelf. But I picked up a Nina Simone record instead. I Put a Spell on You. I bought it quietly. And when I returned to my hotel, I placed it beside my bed like a small ritual. A reminder that I still had music in me, even if they never heard it. February rolled in quietly, like a sigh. Montreal snow didn't fall. It whispered. Soft against the glass of the hotel window, settling in corners like secrets you no longer had to keep. I woke early most days, not from habit, but because there was something peaceful about sitting in the dark before the city opened its eyes. I'd wrap myself in the hotel's heavy robe, drink instant coffee by the window, and watch the bakery across the street switch on its lights. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. No one asking why I looked tired. No one reminding me that Elise was a morning person, or that Ben was already running marathons by my age. Just me, and the hum of a radiator that didn't expect anything in return. The first time I went a full week without checking the family group chat, I felt like I'd skipped a funeral I was never really invited to. Then I realized I didn't need to grieve people who were still alive, just the parts of myself they refused to love. At work, they asked me how I liked the city. I told them the truth. It's the first place that hasn't made me feel like I'm waiting for someone to miss me. They laughed, thought I was being poetic. I didn't correct them. Some truths are only for yourself. Ben texted again mid-February. You still mad? Madam. The word felt small, like a bandage being offered to a bullet wound. I left it on red. I knew what he wanted. To be forgiven without ever sitting in the discomfort of what he'd done. He wanted access again. Not closeness, just the permission to forget. Mom sent a package 2 days later. Inside, a scarf she knitted, a photo of the family at Christmas, a card that read, Stay warm. We miss you. Come visit soon. It felt like emotional taxidermy, a carefully posed version of love, stitched and preserved to look like affection, but hollow behind the eyes. I didn't respond. Instead, I folded the scarf, put it in the drawer with the hotel slippers and unused sewing kit. I tore the card in half, not out of anger, but because I wanted to make space, not for them, for myself. One night, I sat in a quiet bar tucked behind a church, jazz playing through old speakers. A woman next to me said, You have the look of someone who just left something behind. I smiled. I guess I did. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them. But that moment stayed with me. The way strangers sometimes see more than family ever tried to. The way someone's silence can feel like understanding instead of punishment. I started taking photos, not for Instagram, not for anyone, just quiet corners, cracks in the sidewalk, coffee cups half finished, reflections in train windows. I filled a folder on my laptop titled, Proof I Was Here, because for years my existence had felt like background noise. Now I wanted to archive it, for me. Some nights I still dreamt of home, the old kitchen with the flickering light, Mom's perfume, Ben's laugh echoing down the hall. But in the dreams, I was always outside, face pressed to the glass, watching them eat dinner, watching them toast to something that didn't include me. And when I woke up, I didn't cry. I just made coffee, looked out at the snow, and reminded myself they didn't lock me out. They just never thought to open the door. March came with thawed sidewalks and soft gray skies. In Montreal, the cold had softened its grip, and the streets began to feel less like exile and more like invitation. There was a bookstore I passed on my walk to work, narrow as a hallway, with sun-faded paperbacks stacked in the windows. One morning, I stepped inside. The bell over the door chimed like a memory that didn't hurt. I ran my fingers across the spines, names I recognized, titles I didn't. There was something sacred about that space. No one looked up. No one asked who I was or what I needed. For the first time in months, I bought something with no purpose, no occasion, just a secondhand novel with the corners curled like flower petals and someone else's underlines scattered throughout. Inside the cover, a single line in blue ink. This helped me feel seen. I closed the book and held it against my chest like it had been written to me. Back in the hotel, I sat cross-legged on the bed and began to read. Each page felt like stitching, not the kind that heals, the kind that remembers. Sometimes pain doesn't fade. It just gets organized. The next text came from Dad. Need your help. Your mother's in the hospital. Just tests. Thought you'd want to know. No, hi. No, how are you? Just the assumption that I would drop everything. Because I always had. When the dishwasher broke. When Ben's car died. When Mom forgot her online passwords and called me in a panic. They only wanted me when I was useful. And now, with something to worry about, they remembered I existed. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off my phone, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't afford to be a tool anymore, not even one polished in guilt. The truth is, love shouldn't feel like labor, but in my family, affection was always transactional. You earned it by showing up, by staying quiet, by asking for nothing. And when I stopped doing those things, they stopped reaching. I used to think that meant I wasn't lovable, but now I understand. I just wasn't easy to love anymore. The next morning, I emailed my manager. I asked if I could extend my stay. She replied in less than an hour, "Absolutely, take what you need." Those words, "take what you need," felt foreign, like a language I'd never been taught by the people who raised me. That evening, I walked to the park near Mont-Royal. There was a man feeding birds with breadcrumbs from his palm, a couple holding hands without talking, a woman sketching the skyline from a bench, her pencil moving like memory. I sat alone and didn't feel out of place, because here, aloneness wasn't failure. It was just space. Back in my room, I played the Nina Simone record, the one I'd bought the first week here and never touched. Her voice filled the small space like a promise, aching, defiant, soft. I stood by the window and let it wrap around me, and for once, I didn't think about who had hurt me, or who might be hurting now. I just thought about the way snow melts when the sun touches it, quietly, unapologetically, like it was never meant to stay frozen forever. 2 weeks passed. No follow-up text from Dad, no updates about the hospital. And I didn't ask. Not out of cruelty, just exhaustion. Because every question I had ever asked in that family, "Do you need anything? Are you okay? Can I help?" was never returned. Their version of love was one-directional, like a street that turned into a dead end once I stopped moving toward it. On Sunday, I opened my inbox and saw another email from my mother. Subject, update. I clicked. They ran tests on my heart. Everything looks fine for now. I know you're busy. Just wanted you to know. Then, at the very bottom, when are you coming home? The word home sat there like bait, like a place I was supposed to long for, like a concept I should be grateful to be offered. But it wasn't home. Not anymore. Home was where your presence didn't feel conditional, where people noticed your silence, not just your service. And in their house, I had always been both background and burden. Never a center, never a voice. I didn't reply. Instead, I reread a line from the secondhand book I'd bought. You can't make people see you by standing still in their blind spot. So I stopped standing there. The next morning, I walked farther than usual. Past my usual cafe, past the quiet record store, until I reached a bridge that arched over a frozen river. There was something about the stillness of ice. That made me think of every version of myself I had tried to preserve. The one who sent birthday cards even when she got none. The one who drove hours to attend parties where no one saved her a seat. The one who laughed too early and apologized too late. All of them frozen, preserved in my family's cold regard. And now, slowly, quietly, melting. I pulled out my phone and typed a message. To Ben, to Mom, to Dad. I won't be coming back anytime soon. I hope you're okay. I need space, and I'm not sorry for that. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the send button. Then I closed the screen. Because even that, felt like more than they had ever given me. And I was done over-explaining my exits. Especially to people who never noticed my entrances. Back at the hotel, I started researching apartments. Nothing serious yet, just curiosity. Just the whisper of permanence. I found one with light hardwood floors and a tiny balcony overlooking a bakery. It was overpriced. Too small. Perfect. I bookmarked it, labeled the folder. Possibility. That night, I made dinner in the tiny kitchenette. Mushroom soup and store-bought bread, served in the mug I drank coffee from every morning. I didn't light a candle, didn't make it a moment. It already was, because no one would ever again have to notice me. For me to feel worth noticing. I wasn't healing, not in the big, cinematic way, but I was changing, and that, for now, was enough. Spring arrived slowly in Montreal. The snow pulled back like an old tide, revealing cracks in the pavement, sprouts in sidewalk corners, cigarette butts half frozen into the thaw. I started waking up without the tightness in my chest, no invisible weight pressing against my ribs. Just light, not joy. But the kind of peace that comes from no longer needing anyone to understand you. I visited the apartment I had bookmarked. The building smelled like old wood and warm laundry. The landlord had kind eyes and asked if I'd lived in the neighborhood before. I said not really. But in a way, I had. I'd lived in the in-between long enough. Between seen and unseen. Between loved and tolerated. Between silence and swallowing. And now, I was ready for something that felt like belonging, even if I had to build it from the floorboards up. I signed the lease that afternoon. 6 months, month to month after that. No promises, no permanence, just space, and the ability to choose. On move-in day, I carried everything myself. 2 suitcases, 1 plant, a coat I wasn't ready to let go of yet. I unpacked slowly, hung photos of no one I knew, just ones I liked. Curved shadows, open windows, a street light glowing in fog. And then I opened the book I'd bought that first week, the one with the inscription. Inside, I added my own line just below the original. This helped me feel like I never had to explain myself again. I closed it gently, slid it onto the new shelf, and turned toward the kitchen to boil water for tea. I didn't tell my family I moved. I didn't block them, didn't write a grand goodbye. I just let the distance settle, let the silence stand, let the absence speak the language I had exhausted myself trying to pronounce. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Weeks later, a postcard arrived. No return address, just a photograph of a lake at dusk. On the back, 2 words in Ben's handwriting. I understand. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. But I pinned it to the side of the fridge. Not because I wanted to hold on to it, but because some things, like grief, like growth, deserve to be seen before they're released. I go for walks most evenings now, down unfamiliar streets that already feel like mine. Sometimes I bring my camera, sometimes I don't. Last week, I passed a girl sitting alone in a cafe window, chin in hand, face turned toward the glass like she was waiting to be chosen. I saw myself in her, and I kept walking. Because I don't wait to be seen anymore. I don't wait to be invited. I don't wait to be worthy of the room. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because staying had become a slow disappearance. And I finally loved myself enough to step fully into the light.